Today on the Communicative Leader, we're exploring leading with revolving team members. So we are going to welcome Karen Cashin, and she leads a team with revolving members, but I want to complicate this a bit further. Not only does the membership change frequently, but she's working with folks who typically don't have a background or training or experience in communication. Hello, and welcome to the Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah O'Million Hodges. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On the Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. I am so excited to introduce you to Karen Cashin. Karen and I have known each other for a long time. We met while earning our master's degree in organizational communication and public relations. And Karen is truly an expert in strategic communication, and she's used these skills in a variety of industries. What else is really unique about Karen's leadership and team is that it changes, like a lot. But before we dive into that, I want to tell you a little bit more about Karen. Karen began her career in public relations for B2B and automotive clients. She shifted to internal and member communications for a large healthcare system, and for the last 9 years, she has worked at a professional services firm. There, her role allows her to utilize her vast communication expertise to include the voice of the customer in creatively crafted materials to advance awareness, education, and adoption of firm initiatives within the Americas. As you can see, Karen is, just plain awesome. One of the things I admire most about her is the way in which she leads. She is a true communicative leader. She is people-focused. She thinks deeply about what her team members need individually and collectively to succeed and grow professionally. She is invested in them as people. She gets to know them individually, asks about their goals, what skills they like to develop, and then she creates a plan with them. But again, what else is really unique here is that her team and the members revolve. Not only does this membership change frequently, but she's working with folks who don't have a background or training and oftentimes experience in communication. Yes, now you can see why Karen is a unicorn of leaders. This woman is amazing, my friends. A quick recap. Karen onboards and assimilates new team members several times per year, gets to know them, invests in them, and sets them up to be successful in an area and with a skill that they have most likely never intentionally honed previously. Woo! So now we're going to talk to Karen and learn more about what she does and how she does it. So Karen, I'm so excited to welcome you to the Communicative Leader and so thrilled to share your incredible leadership with others. And secondly, before we dive into these intricacies, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure, Leah. I like to think of our team as the internal communications and education creators and navigators for one of our client-serving service lines. We work on materials to help client servers win and deliver work, doing it well, in line with our processes, and also keep them up to speed on important firm initiatives. The types of content we create ranges from emails to infographics to web content to surveys and really almost anything in between. The team writes the content, works with the designers to make it look good, evaluates distribution mechanisms, the whole process. I mentioned surveys and really want to call that out as an important part of our work, because if our audience doesn't understand what we're saying or finding our message, we probably need to make some changes. The surveys have had a really large role in how we've shifted focus in collateral types, explanations, even just spelling out terms differently than we might have before. They're also really great learning opportunities for my team, as it opens another skill set for question creation and data collection. It then helps us remain competitive in an environment that places a lot of weight on quantitative measures and may have used to think of communications as just those kind of quote-unquote soft skills. In fact, when I was hired, I was the first communications professional in this type of role. They had always had people who didn't have a communications background before me. And then I had to level set what good driven communications would even look like. Within the past year, my role has really evolved to be more of a strategic leader with impact on my global counterparts and taking on a larger piece of the pie for some of the big changes that we have ahead of us. With the new shift, we're doing a lot more leader level communications, which I really enjoy. I really like that we're getting to that audience now, but it's added that layer of intricacy for my team because they might not have been doing those prior to coming to me. This is where I get to put on my chipper Karen leader hat and really explain that this is a good skill for them to utilize down the road in their career. In addition to the content that I mentioned before, we're really expanding that to be more kind of presentation, electronic newsletters, things like that. But I should mention the communications team does not do this in a vacuum. We're very closely aligned with our deployment experts, and we're also getting more involved in change management as of late, which is a great learning opportunity for the team since I'm already ProSci certified.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Karen. And I love the focus on surveys, on looking at data. Because, like you said, before communication was really seen in many ways as a soft skill or something that was dispensable. And we recognize that if we don't communicate well to our employees internally, then whatever we do externally really isn't going to matter.
Exactly. I think it's been a big shift for us because people just kind of take well, they're here, they know things. But I always go back to something that I heard very early in my career, which was your employees are really your best customers. So if you're not getting through to them and they don't understand things, there's no way that somebody who's hearing about your company, or in our case, when they're communicating with our clients, that they're really going to be able to understand and figure out what we're doing and, more importantly, why we're doing it.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Employees as the best customers. And that makes me think too, as a professional communicator, how often other people will post something to an intranet and think, communication has occurred. I am done. And we're seeing that this is a huge process and a never ending cyclical process.
It's a good point there, Leah, because that is the technical letter of the law, so to speak. When we talk about communication, you typed something, you communicated. However, that second part is, was the message received? And was it the message you intended to be received? So, yes, their emails are communications. However, are they always our best line of defense for things? Perhaps not.
Yeah, bingo. Thank you, Karen. Well, great. So now we have this general idea of your role. Can you help us understand how you lead a rotating team? So that is, how do you work in terms of getting to work with and training new members who everyone knows is going to rotate off at some point?
Yes, it really is a unique situation, one which I'm not sure I wholly appreciated when I came into this role. But as an internally supportive initiative, we're a small team of permanent leaders who then go out and recruit and onboard people who are looking for a change of pace and new opportunities to support our business in a completely different way. We know that our client serving people do a very important, very demanding job, but sometimes they want or need a break from that grind. That's where our rotational program comes in. And we have a wealth of opportunity in the types of activities that they can do for us during that rotational time. That's one nuance of this specific situation. Everything we do has to be in line with current business needs, and is one reason why we've really kind of shifted our focus over the past year. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, people don't come in or roll off all at the same time. So I could have somebody that's rolling off in November and then not have two new team members coming on until February. There isn't a consistent, you roll on X date, you roll off on X date. So that for me is also a little bit of a struggle, as I like to plan and I like to plan far in advance. But when individuals come to our program, they have one of us permanent leaders as kind of their team or work stream lead. So that means we're helping guide them on the day-to-day activities, helping them find feedback providers, sometimes even doing it ourselves. But we really encourage them to maintain their network and their connection to their home base. They still have their leader from the client serving side with whom they need to have check-ins and who has a say in their final performance feedback. We're there, but I kind of like to call it, we're not the quote-unquote bio parent in this situation. It's a little bit of a step parent situation. So we can tell them not to eat the cake, but if the home area says you can eat the cake, we get overruled on things. And this is where I really wanted to tie into one of your previous podcasts where you talked about the difference between managers and leaders. And as I was listening to that episode, I was nodding along because you and I are very much on the same page with that managers and leaders are not quite the same. You really can't manage people and get the same results, both in terms of financials and deliverables and relationships. But in leading people, you really help them find their potential while meeting those other items. It's one reason why I prefer the term leader instead of manager. And with what we have going on right now, the level of change that's really in front of us, leading the team from today to the future state, it's going to take a village to make that work, and it's going to take us acting as a true team. From our program perspective, we also then have to make sure that a key part of our hiring and internal training process is getting the team to understand and implement the why. Why does our program exist? Why are they even here? Why does the rest of the business look at it as a key internal function? The why is, really for the best interest of all of us to be successful. But it's really kind of a mind shift for our rotators because when you're out in a sales environment, we know it's about the dollars and cents. It's really about the numbers. But here we have so many other impact measures, as we call them, that might not align to what they were used to. We really have to get them on board with what the why is and how what they're doing, even from a communications perspective, is impacting our internal bottom line.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. I'm taking notes, Karen, because of everything you're saying. So I love the mentoring role that comes in here and this ability to cross train internally. So if we're thinking about internal growth, and then I'm also thinking about the enormous challenges that you're saying when you are working with these individuals, they're on your team and you're their day-to-day first point of contact, but then they still have a like a home base leader. So thinking about those relational intricacies and the leadership there, and then two, in helping people to understand different impact factors. Like you said, this mind shift, all while onboarding them and thinking about leader member relationships and thinking about group dynamics and this the importance and impact of communication. Wow, that is amazing. Like I said, a leader unicorn here, my friends.
It's a lot more under the surface. If you think of the old image where a duck or a swan looks really graceful while they're on top of the water, but you don't see what their legs are doing underneath. There's a lot of that when we look at how many moving pieces we really have in this environment.
Yes, yes. I think that is perfect visual for us there. So Karen, so I know that there isn't a hard and fast timeline where people stay or they onboard or they leave, but on average, how long do your members tend to stay and work with your team?
Yeah, so we start with either a 6 month or a year-long rotation and we move from there. But we've also had instances where the home area or the rotator will suggest only having a rotation through the end of a fiscal year or through the end of a calendar year. We also offer extension periods, and some individuals are able to stay longer. But as I think we've kind of already established, the home area really has the final say in how long a rotation can be. But with that said, the home area can also ask for a rotator back at any time if a pressing client need comes up. So, for example, I had someone who was on my team for a very short period of time because there was a client need in that individual's area that required certain skills and clearances. And the person on my team was the only one who had those. So that meant that they had to go back into the client serving environment sooner than we were necessarily planning on. And the person can decide to leave as well, right? This is not a situation where there's no easy or hard way out. If they need to leave for any specific reason or it's just not working out for them, that happens as well. Same on our side. If it's just not a great fit for the program and the individual, we as leaders can have those conversations as well. It really is a situation where the length of time has to work for all three parties, essentially, within this environment. And it's also really a critical conversation when somebody applies to the program and part of our goal setting exercises once we're here. So I've had rotators that have stayed 6 months. I've had rotators that had to roll off after 3. I've had rotators, that extend. There really isn't a crystal ball to kind of figure out for each rotator how long this is going to last and how much of a relationship we are really then able to build. It's specific to their experience, to their goals, and what's going on in their business as well. And I think we all know what's gone on in the world over the last couple of years, and that's really had some significant changes to what we did and how we did it. So at the start of the pandemic, we were shifted even more so from what we're doing now to be a little bit more operational with some things. And I had some individuals who started right before that or who came on during that transitional period. And their experience was so vastly different than, say, my first group of rotators or the group that I'm working with now. And that really impacted and colored how they felt about the rotation and to some extent how we were able to engage with them. So that ask and experience, totally different than somebody who came onto the program in, say, January of 2020. But it was a good experience for me as a leader to kind of look back and refocus how I present some of our materials and to some extent, even how I handled the interviewing process moving forward.
Yes, I love this. I think that so much of what you're saying goes back to two words I use a lot with leadership is it depends. And I think those are two very, very frustrating words to be on the receiving end of, especially when you are a planner and so much of your role requires the strategic planning and forecasting. But also, we're seeing here how much adaptability and flexibility it requires, and then how you get to use your expert communication in order to help kind of massage that process for everyone.
Yeah, I like to say I may not be flexible in terms of physical flexibility in life, but within this role, you really have to be very agile in how you're thinking about things. And then when you start moving things around, where those pieces are going to fit.
Yes, yes, that's a perfect word for it. All right. So, a thing I want to point out here, folks, is that with what Karen is doing, she is the one constant. So, Karen, you're the one who sets and maintains the culture, the team expectations through and across others' rotations. So, can you tell us a little bit about those initial thoughts when you took on this role, especially in terms of leading a rotating team?
Initially, I think I was just kind of crazy and wanted to have others in the circus with me. I'm kidding when I say that, but my first job when I came to this role was to create and recruit an entirely new team. There were no rotators left over from the previous individual's time within the program. So it was literally bare earth, ground zero, build your own Sims fortress here is what we were looking at. So I wanted to make sure that I had an environment that was, pretty inclusive and not a big scary, I'm a communications professional, here are my expectations of you day one. Everything you do has to be letter perfect and has to be the, best read materials throughout the company. That was not my expectation. I really wanted it to be an open question, open door kind of place. Leah, you and I know the basics of communication aren't rocket science, but we also know it can be pretty daunting to bring someone in who doesn't have the tools or the background and tell them, you're going to go create an infographic. You're going to do a podcast script very early on. What I wanted to teach and coach them on had to have tangible, real world examples and impact for how it would benefit them long term, especially when they rotate back to their home base. But I also knew I didn't have a whole lot of time to get people up to speed and to get us to work as a team. So for me, it really meant being very proactive in my thinking and groundwork on my part as a leader to identify what would make us successful before we even started. When it came to the rotating part, I'll be honest, it was a little overwhelming at first, especially as I didn't have as much experience with the inner workings of that particular service line when I came into the role. I also didn't know if anybody would stay past 6 months. If we're honest, I wasn't even sure I would get people to stay 6 weeks because of what we were asking them to do and the whole different skill set. So I had to prepare a program that was really looking 8 months out with the possibility that it wouldn't even be a full team of 4 trying to get us to that level of deliverables. So there was a lot of scaling and triaging of projects that was playing a big role, especially at first. But it also meant being forward thinking and looking at those estimated roll-off dates and trying to work the plan so that things would either be finalized or as close to finish as possible so we wouldn't lose time if everyone decided to bail out on 6 months day one. But I should be transparent that as much as I planned, we did get a pretty big curveball with the necessary project at the halfway point. And that made me look like that meme of the person who just throws all the papers in the air and is like, this is what it is. That was pretty much where we were, I think, the day that we were given that project. But as a team, we adjusted, we still made our deadlines, and we created the first ever training and learning program that this area had ever done. And I think this is one of my shining stars of being here. Each of those initial rotators asked to extend at their 3-month mark, and so I actually had those individuals for a full year. As a leader, it made me really happy, but I also was pretty secure in my backup plan just in case that was not going to be our reality.
Yes, thank you, Karen. Your experience is a good way of exemplifying the weight that is on a leader's shoulders, in that we recognize that from the outside looking in, we oftentimes don't know how much our leader is carrying and all of the moving pieces. So thank you for sharing that with us, because again, a lot of times this is really heady work. It is very lonely work. A lot of times it is very isolated work because there are boundaries between what you want to share with your team. Maintaining credibility and showing them I can handle this. This is what I'm in this role for. But it's also a lot for one person to manage.
It really is. And as I look at some of the things that we have in our very near term, perhaps even that were brought up on a meeting yesterday afternoon, I was thinking just that. When you have a good team, you want to delegate with them because you know they can handle it. And not only do you know they can handle it, you know it's a good experience for them. And it improves their eventual leadership skills as well. But then you also look at the things that, as many of them as there may be, are things only you can do. And that's not because you don't trust your team. It's not because your team doesn't have that skill set. It's just the nature of those leadership roles where you said it best. There is that heavier weight on some things. So when I look at my to-do list, like I just did this morning, and had a chuckle with the things that I already know are moving to tomorrow, it's because we have those added meetings, we have those added responsibilities, and that those added responsibilities and meetings also can never be at the detriment of how we're trying to lead and coach and mentor the individuals that we have. So while it may create what some may see as more work for us, it actually does then benefit us when we learn how to navigate those times, when we learn where those true delegation abilities are, and when we just learn sometimes not everything can get done, right? We sometimes have to move something to another day. We know it will get done then, but not everything can get done in the same set of 24 hours as we may have thought. And we just need to be agile and flexible as we think about that too.
Yes, I love that. Your experience is making me think about a previous episode. We talked about how true leaders, when they have adversity, whether it is someone leaving unexpectedly or just, the daily amount of work and emails and triage that's going on, is that true leaders kind of fail forward. I'm not calling this a failure, but part of that means taking responsibility. And I think best of all is being able to learn. And like you're saying, recognizing, yes, I have a lot more work after all these meetings, but I'm learning how to navigate this. I'm learning how to shield my employees from certain things. And that's what a true leader is, someone who is committed to that reflection and learning process. So thank you, Karen.
Yeah, and I like how you said that. And it wasn't something when I was thinking through some of my talking points for this that I necessarily had kind of put pen to paper on. But one of the things my team knows is we are a team. We will be successful as a team, and everyone has them. So I don't like the, red is wrong and failure is bad. There are times where failures happen. There are times where we don't have our best project, whether it was in terms of content or design or whatever it may be. but we are a team. And should one of those perhaps not as positive experiences happen, my team knows that I am the face of that. My team knows that I will be the one who is having those conversations, that I will be that front shield, like you said, of, okay, if there's a conversation that might get heated or might not be some of our best work as a leadership group, I will be the person that is in that meeting. I will then go back to my team and we will talk about it as a team and we will figure it out. And there's not this blame placed on an individual. This is what Karen's team did. And this is how we are going to make it better moving forward. It's really important for me, especially since these aren't our people, if you will, in terms of where they live permanently within the organization, that I never want one of them to be in a position where they feel that it is a flop or that it is a failure or that they are in it alone, because they are definitely not. So that is on me as a leader to kind of take that bullet, if you will, and then go back and say, okay, this is what happened. This was the response to it, and this is how we're going to fix it. But it is never going to be rotator A is the person who is going into that meeting and having to take that bullet. That is always me. I am the leader, and that is my job.
Yes, I love that. I have leadership goosebumps. You can't see it, but listening to Karen talk about how she leads is what, if every leader took on responsibility this way and enacted it the way Karen is, then this world would be a lot better place, my friends. I can say that as a leadership communication expert. So Karen, that's a nice segue to our question. So we were thinking about these kind of initial thoughts when you took on this role. So now you've had some time to digest the concept of leading a rotating team. So what are some of these goals you set as a leader for this team now that you have experience?
Well, I'm a bit type A and a bit competitive, which I'm pretty sure is not a shock to those of you who know me. So from the first set of rotators to now, I really wanted us to be the best communications team ever with the best read rate of our materials. So we always have a lot of goals. I wish I could say that sometimes we didn't have as many as we do, but we're pretty ambitious over here. But that's also because of the caliber of people with whom I'm engaging. So again, we have those team goals, but then we also have personal goals for each rotator that comes through. And those need to be woven in, and we need to look at the wealth of experience we're able to provide and where we might be able to fit those in as well. But like I mentioned before, a goal is great, but none of these goals and none of the planning will matter if we can't cultivate a good team, if we can't cultivate good relationships between each of us. So from day one set of rotators, 6 years ago to now, I really look at my building process by thinking about those characteristics of high-performing teams and then making sure that I have a teaming atmosphere as kind of the bedrock, and we build everything from there. I think if you were to ask anyone who had been on my team, what was the word said the most during our interviewing process, team would be it. I even hear myself saying it sometimes during the interviews and think, Karen, bring it back a notch. You've already said this. We're hammering the point a little too much. But I really want them to know that is how we get to success, is by being that team. Because I know that if I have people who are willing to learn and really have that drive for it, and then really, willing to team well with others, I can coach them on the communication specific parts. Skills are easier to learn than trying to change someone's personal makeup and characteristics. So that's what I look at first. And then the coaching, that part for me, I find very engaging and a little bit easier. So the coaching, that's really kind of breaking down these communication terms so that nobody's hung up on them, putting it into plain language, if you will. And then, explain they've seen these types of collateral before. You might not call it what we call it here, but you have seen these graphical representations of what we've done. I give people links to sources for writing, creating. I've even connected someone with a copy editor before because that was a skill they were looking at. So they have a set of resources on day one that they feel confident being able to refer back to. And then for me, I set up kind of a tag team shadow model when I have new people coming to the team. so that no one ever works on their first project alone. Of course, that meant back in the day, I was everyone's tag team buddy and shadow model, but it's worked out pretty well from there. Because like I said, no one is an island on this team, and we are all here for you. So after somebody kind of does that first time as a shadow, they then transition to being the lead on a project and might have an experienced team member be their number 2 shadow, just so that they have somebody to go back and say, okay, is this the best way with this stakeholder to handle this meeting? Is this really the timeline for putting this type of material together? Before anybody even gets to that project with a stakeholder, I will do an introduction, either email or call, with that stakeholder saying, hi, person A, this is Leah. She is new to my team. She's taking over from person Z. These are the projects they'll be working on with you. And that way it's just really easy because there's a nice transition, but we also feel like it's the care and feeding of our stakeholders, right? You need to make sure that they know that they are still going to get great service from you, no matter who is on the team. And then most important on my side is making sure my team knows that I want questions. I would rather have someone ask a million questions and us have 2 to 3 meetings rather than them doing something, it being completely off base and having to recreate something, and then they don't feel well about it either. So here it really is an open door policy. Not that we have doors as we are remote, but the theoretical open door that we have here. So I want those questions, whether it's about the project, how we're handling things, but at the end of the day, they come from that client serving world. And that's a big part of our audience. So if something isn't sitting right with them, or something doesn't make sense, or something doesn't seem to be tying into another initiative, chances are our audience isn't going to get that either. So whether it's about the role or their career, anything else they feel comfortable sharing with me, I'm here to answer and be honest. Because for me, if we don't have that professional trust and respect, we can't function as a team. We might function, but it's not going to be functioning as a team. And that doesn't make sense for however long we are together. But the opposite side of that goes back to what we were talking about the added responsibilities. Because as our team has shown how impactful we can be and what we can accomplish, we've started to get more requests. We're brought in on more projects. So with this, it could get overwhelming for people. And I'll be transparent, sometimes it's a little overwhelming for me when I just look at the sheer number of things. But for my team, I just try to keep this even keel and make sure that the team knows where that day or that week or that month's focus should be. And also realize we have a lot of external influences that impact what we do, whether that's who has the final say over content because they're the subject matter resource or whatever it might be. But I kind of use the line to, help set the tone of we can only worry about what we can control. We can't worry about those other things. We can't worry about those other impacts. We can't worry how somebody is going to respond to us saying we have to move this 11 o'clock meeting to 2, whatever that might be. We can't get caught up in the what ifs and try to fix everyone and everything. First, we aren't their therapist. And second, we're not chocolate. We cannot make everyone happy. We can really only do what we can do here. But if we focus on those things that we can control, we can provide great direction on those we can't and showcase the impactful and amazing things that we can do. So I never want my team to be overwhelmed personally about that. Me as the leader, it really does feel like a lot, but like I said, that's why there's running, meditation, and yoga after the day is done.
Yes, I love that. And it's so important. I can't wait to do an episode on leadership and self-care. Thank you for acknowledging that is something that you need to think about and you need to integrate in order to feel like you can be present for the job. It's so important. Another thing I love that you talked about was capitalizing on your rotator strengths as other subject matter experts, because I think that they probably have a small amount of tear or maybe a large amount of tear because they're moving into an area they probably don't have a ton of experience with, but they're excited about it. They've selected this, they've gone through the interview process, but I'm sure another way that you help put them at ease right away is in saying, hey, you've been on the receiving end of this. You have this expertise, you have this experience. How does this land with you? And that's a great way to show them we need you on this team. Like you bring something to the table that helps us collectively be better than we were before.
It's been funny because when I first came in, my first year here, we really expanded one of those surveys to our practitioner base. And it went to a lot more people than it ever had before. It was a very small survey when I originally came here. We expanded it to change the questions up to really get to the meat of what we were doing, much larger audience. And now that we're going into our 7th year of doing this survey, I now have people that I'm interviewing who have received the survey and taken it before. So it's a great example to say, remember when you answered this and you thought, does anybody really look at these things? You now have these Excel spreadsheets worth of data where we have collected everything you have ever typed to us. And see, as a result of survey X, we now do a different collateral type because that's what some of you said you needed. So it's a great example to show how things really do tie together, even if at your first glance it doesn't. And goes back to we all have communication in areas that are not leadership communication, not work communications. It's just helpful to see now how you might be able to take some of what you're doing here and really apply it to everything else and see that you were doing some of these things all along.
Yes. Oh, I love that. So Karen, I have 2 questions for you that are going to tie together. So it's a why question, and then I want to follow it with a how question. So as I've mentioned, I'm so impressed with how much you invest in these members. And this is no small thing because we've all worked with permanent, I'm doing air quotes, but you can't see, but permanent managers who really don't invest much in us individually, even though we know we're going to be working together indefinitely. So you as a leader who knows between, 3 months and maybe 12 months, you have to say goodbye to these team members. Why do you invest so much in them? Yes, folks, I just asked why, because this is a huge ask of a leader's time and energy, and Karen does it so well.
I was chuckling internally at that permanent leaders who probably couldn't remember what hair color some of us have had, let alone what really mattered to us as individuals and as professionals as we worked forward. For me, really the best part of this job is that I get to meet and hopefully have an impact on these amazing individuals. The people part is really my favorite part. The planning and the communications and what I've invested my career in really is secondary to being able to have these relationships with these people, many of whom, if it weren't for this program, I probably would have never actually met. But for me, it's simple. They're people, and I really get to enjoy meeting people. So my style is very much of kind of the servant leadership aspect of it. And that goes a long way in just being intrinsically invested in investing in them. Because I look at it as if you treat people first and teammates or reports or whatever word your organization uses second, things tend to go a lot smoother. So I've been in work environments where teams referred to people within this sort of nature as, air quotes again, resources. And I have to be honest, that word just irrationally grates my nerves to such a large extent. The people on our team aren't resources or widgets. They are living, breathing individuals. They have skills and experiences and lives just like we do as leaders. Why would we make that distinction of an us and a them? That to me does not make a lot of sense. Because we won't be our best team and get the best results if we don't work together. And we really can't do that unless we know each other to some extent. Now, I am not saying you need to share your deepest, darkest secrets and fears with your leader. This is always a level of whatever an individual is comfortable of sharing. But it's for all our benefit to know what motivates, what turns people off to a project, how people like to be rewarded, and what people want to learn so that we can invest that time and get to where we want to be as a team. So, for example, if I know that Jesse likes doing infographics, but is really hesitant about commercials, yet Lance really loves podcasts, but doesn't like the quick nature of success stories, I can work on our project plan and play to the strengths and maybe give shadowing opportunities on those other items. That way, they're learning something new, they're finding a new skill set, and are overall better rounded teammates when they leave me. In my opinion, especially with this rotational model, it's only a good thing if it works for everyone. It isn't just about the goals I set or the deliverables I design, but it's about that rotator being able to go back and speak about the experience in a positive light and know that they gained something during that time here, even if it really just kind of is that good memory. And as I was thinking through this, another thing that really came to the top of my mind, and I think all of us as leaders need to be a little bit more cognizant of, is the recognition factor. As a society and a workforce, we just have so many expectations of just do the job and just get it done. But yeah, we can kind of get complacent and forget that we need to tell people when they're doing a good job, when they've excelled in something new, and so on. When was the last time you said thank you to your team for helping you out with something or for getting something done way ahead of time? So whether it's verbal in an email or some formal mechanism that a company has set up, make sure you're continuing to recognize your team as well. And at the end of the day, that investment just kind of happens from there.
Yes, I love that, Karen. I love the response to why. It's simple. They're people. That is something I'm going to return to. I'm going to integrate it in lectures. I'm going to make sure that it is seen and heard, because what a beautiful and, again, simple way of looking at it and an important way of recognizing these are people we're working with, not widgets, not just a resource, but a human, right? So we just looked at the the why. So now I'm interested in the how. So we know why you invest so much in your team members. And now I want to know, like, on a day-to-day basis, how do you do this? So from the interview process to welcoming someone new to the team, how do you onboard and assimilate them?
So to take a step back to the interviewing process, I used to have a very formal interviewing process. And I noticed that for this specific example, for me, it doesn't work as well for where I would like us to all be. I'm not saying you just talk to somebody and then kind of say, oh, they seem cool. Sounds like they'll do a great job here. It's more in depth than that. But again, it's like I said, I can coach on some skills, but there are some intrinsic characteristics that I need. So now it's a little bit more example and theory based in terms of what have you seen, what do you like, what don't you like, what's your best working style, how do you respond in certain situations for the interview. But our onboarding has changed slightly in terms of our ask of stakeholders, but it's still mostly in line with what I started when I began the role. So like I mentioned, there's an onboarding deck they get day one. It has examples of work we've done before, how to create different collateral types, timelines for how long each of our collateral types should take, stakeholder listings, all of that jazz. And then I ask that for their first week, they really spend time doing a deep dive through our SharePoint, our teams, our previous collateral, where we might have posted something to the company intranet, etc., to really get more acclimated with our topics and our point of interest. I've had some people say it might seem a little crazy that I basically say, here, take a week and read, right? That doesn't seem like the high-paced corporate environment where you come in and you're on the ground running from second one. But like I said, they probably didn't have time to sit there and do these deep dives on these things before they came here, because it was selling, it was delivering, it was very client-centric and what that external client was looking for from them. So it benefits us because that way when we do have them in front of stakeholders, they have a leg to stand on so that they can say, oh, I know Project C, we did this with you 6 months ago. We'd like to build upon it. I know because I was on your SharePoint that some things have changed since then. They come in and sound much more knowledgeable, which also helps build that trust in what we're doing. I also ask that my rotators have one-on-ones with the other workstream leads and the other workstream team members so that they get that broad experience for who else is on the team besides our smaller sub-team. For the first 2 months, and it can be longer if they want it to be, I ask them to set up one-on-ones with me at a cadence of their choosing. And that's really time for them to talk to me about whatever is on their mind, work or career related. That's not really time to walk over our projects and see where we are with things, because we have team calls for that. I then encourage them to have working sessions and calls without me, with the other rotators, so that they can really form that cohesive team. I find it also helps empower them with their decision making and relationships, especially when I'm out of office and they're the ones on my out of office email who are going to get questions when I'm not here. And with all of this, I hope they really know and feel that when it comes to what we're doing and how we're storyboarding changes, it's okay to say, I don't know, if they actually don't know. The words I don't know are not bad. They are not words that just excuse everyone from all responsibility. It just really leads to a new opportunity. Because I'd rather us have that question about where our opportunities might be than to go down a rabbit hole that's creating even more work that can lead to someone starting to feel overwhelmed. I don't want that to happen. And a big part of this in the onboarding, and that I say probably weekly, even as we move forward, is I make it clear that we all have priorities, and they are big ones outside of work. I don't put a value on or judge when people say they need time away or ask what it's for. At the end of the day, it's actually none of my business, and I don't ask why unless they'd like to tell me they're going on some great vacation or there's something else going on in their life that they need to pay attention to. Because what's important to me might not be important to them, and vice versa. But it's really just kind and respectful to allow them that importance and that time as they need it. I really operate as we're all adults. Until or unless there's an issue with not making meetings or deliverables, work your schedule as you need. In my situation, I'm really dealing with individuals who've been in the workforce for years, not fresh college graduates. They're used to some level of autonomy, and I am the last person who really is going to sit here and start acting like a school headmaster. Now, that isn't to say that it's a free-for-all and people only work an hour a day or are gone for days at a time without me knowing. We're very respectful of giving a heads up if it's going to be a full day out. And we utilize our other team members if an emergency comes up and we need coverage. It's just about setting the expectation from the beginning and being very communicative with others. I've really only had one time where I had an issue with some of this, with somebody not being upfront and perhaps trying to take advantage of the situation. So I think it's working pretty well.
Yeah, that is awesome, Karen. I love so much of what you've said. And some of the notes that I've taken is, that plan for day one. It isn't, oh gosh, yes, you were starting today. Huh. Okay. Well, what questions do you have? And putting it on the member, you have a plan. And then the week one, the giving that new member time to get to know you and your team and what you do. Because I think so much of leading is thinking about what tools do my team members need. And I think a lot of people overlook time as a valuable tool, time as a mechanism for learning, time as a mechanism for developing confidence and comfort with content. And you do a great job with that. And the other thing I really want to point out, I love this, is I don't know is not a dirty word. And it's also not a get out of jail free card, right? That it's recognizing that it's okay to not know, that we have other resources that we can look into, whether it's going to a SharePoint or having a conversation as a way to explore that, but also recognizing you're still responsible. You still need to be accountable, but doing that in a way that is forthcoming. So thank you, Karen. That is awesome.
I look at it as I am horrible with numbers and Excel. That's why I'm on the communication side. I am not somebody's accountant. I am not trying to figure out, forecasting sales numbers, anything like that. So I don't know a lot of those things when people talk about, oh, we can just do this in Excel, and I get the deer in headlights look. And it's okay for me to say, I don't know. And then I follow that up with, I don't know, but that sounds cool. Can you show me? The same way they can come to me and say, I don't know how it's best to pare down these bullets so we're still getting impactful words at the beginning and we're doing this at the end. Or I don't know how to plain language this. Can you show me? And by being able to show those vulnerabilities as a leader with where you know your opportunities are, I think that goes a long way to showing your team it's okay when you come back and say this to me.
Yes, I love that. The role modeling and recognizing that you as a leader don't have all of the answers and that's why you're together as a team. Awesome. Okay, a couple more questions for you, Karen. One thing I always really appreciated in learning about your work is the culture that you set. So again, not only do you have rotating members, but you're all remote. So yes, my friends, you see a leadership unicorn, like I said. So what advice do you have for creating such a supportive, creative, trusting culture across a team that we know is going to change at some point in the foreseeable future, and two, a team that is virtual and located across the country and sometimes across the world?
Yes, for us, even pre-pandemic and these new changes to working models we're seeing, my team was fully remote and geographically dispersed. So I said it before, but setting expectations from the beginning goes a long way to creating that environment, remote or not, that will be thriving with what you do. So I try to model those behaviors that we all know we should be doing, regardless of level, whether you're the leader, the newest person, or not. But I also know that I'm not perfect as much as I may try to be. I don't have just good days. I have days where perhaps we're not saying things in the best way that we can, or that emails might not be as explanatory as they should be. But you need to own those days and those responses, and you can see that by just owning that, that will go a long way for your team. So my first bit of advice is to just be honest and human yourself. If you have that quick response that is biting, apologize. If you have a meeting where things get heated, get everyone back together to talk through it and how you can do better. And secondly, I'd say to remember what you're missing in a remote environment and plan ahead for that. I think we've all seen the amount of meetings has increased when people aren't in person, so just be respectful of time. Most of us are in back-to-back meetings, so think about crafting and sharing clear agendas for working sessions beforehand. On my team, we don't always see each other in camera. In fact, more than often, we are not video ready, and we ask for a good day's pre-advance if someone does want to see us on video. So, not being on video and being remote, we have to use clear language since body language isn't an option to get to the meaning. We don't have those nonverbals and facial expressions to know if someone is really joking or if they're serious. And we also might be engaging with someone who doesn't have English as a first language. So some of the references or terms that are used in business might not resonate as well as some pop culture references. And I am the first to admit that I use pop culture references much more than I should. So that is a learning opportunity for me, depending on the makeup of my team. So just think about it and be aware of the backgrounds of your team to be as inclusive in your language as possible. We can't be ambiguous with things when we're remote. We have to be direct. Spelling out things in simple terms like we need, column for A, we need the data from slide 16, ask the designer to use more shapes than images, etc. Instead of, hey, can we move some things? Or just ask the designer to be more powerful. Things like that. And as a leader, sometimes I have to check my expectations too, since we have a finite time to get to a certain level of completion or success for us as a team. So I look at trying to tie some of my reach items we're doing back to their normal role, always going back to what they will do when they are no longer on my team. And then another remote nuance that I think we've all learned, but is probably a good refresher, is be cognizant of time zones when they're different and the needs of each person. So lunch for one individual might be the time someone else has to pick up their child. We don't know what's going on, but if you're working with somebody who is, say, on the West Coast and most of you are on the East Coast, think about the nuance there. So keep those team needs in mind as a leader. And when I think about it with kind of our revolving door that we have, it goes back to not biting off more than you can really chew. I have to be aware of that as a leader. And sometimes I actually have to check my team with it too, because they get so invested and so happy about things that we have coming up. And I get a lot of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we? And I agree. It probably would be really cool if we, but I have to look at what else we have on our plate and the timings of all of that. And lastly, can't repeat this part enough. Be clear about your expectations from the start. from working hours to when you're checking email to checking email on weekends and vacations, which, sidebar, not my expectation. So if any of my team is listening to this, I don't expect any of us to be doing that. To how your meetings should flow, just really be upfront with people with what you're expecting to see.
Yes, I love that. So great advice for virtual teams, but for everyone, right? Things that if we did in any instance, whether it's a work meeting, a PTO meeting, a soccer practice, it can really help everyone to, enact leadership and just communicate and connect in pro-social, normative, expected ways, which always makes life so much easier. Well, perfect. So, Karen, we've talked a lot about onboarding and assimilating. And when we were talking about that, I was thinking about kind of that exit process. So, what does that group process look like for the team when someone is rotating off, and maybe for you individually and even that employee?
I think for me individually, I'm thinking about their roll off date pretty much from the time they join the team. And a lot of that is also because I am so invested in them as individuals, and we do have that teaming atmosphere that it's like the opposite of the countdown to vacation calendar. It's the I'm going to be so sad when this person leaves. But for the team, we begin a month before roll off asking whoever is leaving to do a transition document that they have ready at least 2 weeks before their roll off date. We do a handoff with the stakeholders that they've been engaging with so that we have continuity on the projects. I ask for that rotator to send all their files to me via email, which I know, we have SharePoint, we have Teams, we have great things. I'm a little bit old school, and I always worry that that's going to be the one time the saving process doesn't work, just so that I know I always have the latest files for what they've been doing. As a team, we do a kudos board when someone is leaving, so we can do nice little images and refer back to some of the experiences that we've had. And if it's possible, we do a happy hour call with the person as our last call when they are on the team. I'm really known for saying you can leave ABC, but you don't get to leave me, which is just, it's jokey, right? But it's just my way of letting that person know that I'm still here as a resource, a reference, a mentor, even when they're no longer on my team. If it's a perfect world, we already have their replacement on the team, so that transition seems pretty seamless to just about everybody except me and the rotator that's leaving. But that rotator is responsible for making sure all their work is in the right place. And that rotator is responsible for letting us know if something has come up last minute that might not have been caught in that transition document. That's really their part in making sure that we can continue to function as a team. There is a formal paperwork process when someone is ending a rotation, and then another permanent leader will do an exit interview with them. We really hope that everyone who leaves our program will be an active alumni and a supporter of the program when they're no longer here. And hopefully they'll refer somebody else who's looking for a rotation because they had something meaningful come out of here. So I've had rotators who feel sad about leaving our community. Some that's a little bittersweet. They've really enjoyed their time, but they know really where they want to be, and their career will excel in places that are outside of here. And I've also had a few that are kind of itching to really get back to something else. But at the end of the day, I hope that for them, they've all learned something that they can share, and that I was the best coach they could have while they were here. And I think that really goes back to how we set up the onboarding process and then those clear expectations at check-in points for their time here as well.
Yes, I love that, Karen. One thing I was thinking about when you were sharing your response was leaders versus managers. So I think managers would focus on, and of course you mentioned the formal processes, the paperwork and the exit interview. But as a leader, you recognize, let's do this kudos board. Let's do this happy hour call. Let's think about, the goals we set and how we met them and likely exceeded them. So thank you. That was really fun to hear about the extra that you add. So I have a final question for you. And I think right now, I think everyone knows it is no secret. I truly admire your leadership communication skills, and I am so impressed by you. And you've given us so many important things to consider. I actually almost feel sheepish asking you for more advice, considering how much you have given us. But if you could leave us with 2 or 3 pieces of lessons learned And another way to think about this, if there are only 2 to 3 pieces of leadership or communication advice, what would that be?
I think the one thing I really wish I had known before being in this specific leadership role is really how important language is to your team. And in this environment, how much of coaching enabling language I should be using every day. And I think that's expanded over time. I'm not sure that I necessarily used as much as I could or should have within my first set of rotators, but I think we're getting here now. Because for me, especially in the rotator, or I think it could really even be say for kind of an intern environment, you're not only their leader, but their coach in this new set of skills. And that's something you have to be cognizant of. It's truly a different world than hiring someone you know has gone through, say, all the experience and time hoops that you might think of if you were hiring someone to move into your role because you were the one who was promoted into leadership. But I think this also translates well to other environments where you might be dealing with different skill set levels based on the size of your team. We all know people who have teams full of, let's say, less seasoned resources who might be right out of college, up to people who might be, just a step further down the road than you are in your career. So many of my one-on-ones and sometimes even our team update calls really have me asking, what can I do for you? Where can I help? Because sometimes they just need that refresher that they're not in this alone. And I really am here to help. I am not here to just be that ticket machine that's telling you where to park. We are here together, and I'm here to help you get to the parking garage, let alone know where you're supposed to be parking. So we've really, heard the old adage that people don't leave jobs, they leave people. And I think if you think back to some of the things we've talked about today in building that rapport, if you're not doing those things, I think that's probably really true. We might not always love the work that we're doing, but having that professional respect and that good professional relationship with our leaders can be a big trigger for working through situations instead of just kind of defaulting to, well, I guess it's time for me to move on. Also, I would say to work on ways to be direct without being demanding. It's really a key difference in how a team will respond. So just because you're the leader doesn't mean that you get to be continuously curt or demanding in how you approach your team, because leadership is not the time to say, because I said so. We know that we as leaders have a lot of items coming at us and are privy to information the entire team might not know. We talked about that earlier in terms of where the next focus is going to be and the leader versus team member dynamic in levels of perhaps being overwhelmed. And that is a different level of expectation on us. But it's never an excuse to be a dictator to those to whom you might be delegating. And lastly, I think just remember your team really is made up of those people, not the machines. And think about how you would respond if the ask or the tone was biting or bitter. Because if it would make you feel bad, chances are you probably should not be saying it to your team that way. And with this, I don't mean that all conversations have to be puppies and rainbows and ice creams and everything is awesome. There are times where crucial conversations must be had, especially if it's relating to legitimate performance issues. But it does mean that being mean isn't going to make your end product better or make you a better leader. I think a lot of people think that becoming a leader just means a total 180 from how they engaged and how they spoke before the title, but that's really not true. Sure, as leaders, we have more responsibilities and there might be more eyes on us, but we got to this level and we achieved this level of success for ourselves by being able to build, by being able to lead, by really being able to articulate the vision and the why. So don't let all of that go to waste just because the org chart now has you in a different tier than you were before.
Oh, Karen, I love so much of what you said. I could do a whole episode just reflecting on your lessons learned, and maybe I will one day. But so much, and thinking about the importance of language and being inclusive and recognizing you're a leader and a coach and maybe and a counselor and a cheerleader, and recognizing that we are flexing across all of these different boundaries. And two, the importance of recognizing that just because we have this formal authority, there is no permission to talk to others in a way that we wouldn't want someone to speak to us. And it's funny how often that's forgotten, right? So a lot of this, I think some of the best leadership advice is very, very simple. Things that I would actually teach my children, along this idea of how would that feel if we said that? How would it feel to be on the receiving end? But for some reason as adults, we can forget this because we have stress and we have demands and we have competing demands and people looking to us for myriad things. But like you said, at the end of the day, we are role modeling what we expect and what we would like. And that goes a really long way as a leader.
It really does. I think we've gotten so caught up in expectations, and at this point where we are in our lives and in the world, so much is instantaneous, and it's that instant gratification. And you can find something at the snap of your fingers versus having to go to a library and opening a book. That our expectation level and the way we internalize the knowledge that we have, and sometimes forgetting that others don't have that same knowledge, as quickly embedded in their brain, or we're in that same meeting, that it really is just a second of kind of taking that step back and maybe thinking or taking a breath before we respond to things. And then really thinking through, if I go back and read this team's message in 2 days, how am I going to feel with what I said in it? And I know we're all super busy, and I know we have a lot of demands on our time, but if that 5 seconds of reflection can save something that, worst case scenario could become some sort of talent issue, I think it just benefits all of us to have that breath and remember we really all are working towards the same goal. So let's try to get there in a boat that is still mostly together and not completely beaten up.
Yes. Yes, I love that. Well, Karen, thank you so much for joining us today on the Communicative Leader. I have truly enjoyed this. As I've said, I've always admired you in so many ways, and in particular, the way in which you lead and communicate with so much intention. So again, thank you for joining us today. Next week on the Communicative Leader, coworkers. I love them. I love them not. Well, got to work with them anyway. We're going to look at the important role our peer relationships play in the workplace, from benefits to potential challenges, and how to end a peer relationship if the need arises. All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on the Communicative Leader.